It's easy to take shots at the extremely rich for all of the wildly extravagant purchases they make. But let's face it, if you were suddenly handed more money than you knew what to do with, all that judgment would probably go right out the window. Once the luxury home, expensive decorations and wardrobe, and imported automobile were out of the way, you might even find yourself casting about for more high-end exotic things to surround yourself with. And what's more exotic than an unusual pet? After all, Michael Jackson had Bubbles the chimp, Mike Tyson had a pet tiger, and if you happen to have recently hit the Powerball, allow today's list to serve as your personal guide to the world's most expensive pets. Not everybody is okay with giant snakes as pets, but if the idea doesn't make you squeamish, they're actually perfectly safe, most of the time. Thousands of pythons are sold in the US each year, and as hatchlings they're pretty cheap, anywhere from $20 to $100. But the lavender albino ball python is no ordinary snake. The product of a recessive gene, they carry highly unusual yellow markings and have startling red eyes. For decades, the lavender albino ball python was considered the most expensive pet in the world. Their rarity makes them worth a bundle, and online traders have been known to pull down up to $40,000 for the right specimen. Also, the African native requires a very specific and carefully maintained habitat, which obviously will not come cheap. They look pretty freaky, but they're no more dangerous than any other large snake. That is to say, the danger is fairly negligible as long as you know what you're doing. Like all ball pythons, these reptiles can grow in excess of 8 feet in length and can absolutely injure or kill a human being if unattended or not handled properly. When a lot of people think of exotic pets, the friendly chimpanzee would be the first thing that comes to mind. The intelligent, remarkably human-like creatures have endeared themselves to us through pop culture for decades. Who wouldn't want a chimp companion? Plus, like we mentioned before, the king of pop himself even had one. And if they're good enough for him, they should be good enough for anybody with way too much money and time on their hands. Well, if you're in the market for one, you'll first have to check to see if they're legal in your state. There are no federal regulations governing exotic pet ownership, but 19 states have outright bans on chimp ownership, including California and New York. Chimps are pets which will require highly specialized care, to say the least, and they can be dangerous if provoked or in certain situations. But if you've got the deep pockets to provide 4 pounds of food daily and maintain a habitat suitable for a primate, and your state gives you the green light, you can have your own chimpanzee pal for around $60,000. Just make sure you're in the relationship for the long haul. Chimps can live up to 60 years. If a pet with the exact opposite of a charming personality is more your speed, consider the male stag beetle. You won't want to pet him much. They like to use those huge antler-like jaws to bite, and you'll only want one, unless you want them to fight to the death. In fact, stag beetle fighting as a competitive sport is popular in some parts of the world, which is part of what makes them so expensive. A prime specimen could potentially make its owner a lot of money, so there's something of a collector's item, and it's certainly not because they're cute and cuddly. Depending on the species, stag beetles can grow to between 2 and 5 inches in length. One in particular, Leucasnus cervus, is the largest terrestrial insect in Europe. If you're not the type to easily come down with a case of the heebie-jeebies, they are pretty cool looking, but one of these little critters can set you back up to $89,000. For that kind of money, you may be tempted to go in the other direction and buy a pet you can actually ride. Any equestrian will tell you that among horse breeds, the Arabian is king. It's one of the oldest breeds in the world. Some archaeological evidence suggests that Arabians, or a breed very similar to them, were being bred on the Arabian Peninsula 4,500 years ago. Due to selective breeding, they possess all of the traits most valued in horses: friendliness and willingness to cooperate with people, high spirit and alertness, and body structure and muscle tone, which make the breed a paragon of athleticism. Because of these traits, Arabians are one of the most popular horse breeds in the world, dominating the sports of horse racing and endurance riding. Also, because of these traits, owning one will set you back a pretty penny. Despite a thriving market and strong demand all over the world, Arabians generally won't go for any less than a cool $100,000. And maintaining their health and keeping up with their feeding isn't going to be cheap either. Of course, you might be able to offset the cost by winning the Kentucky Derby. Or if money is no object, just live out your Hollywood dreams by setting out on an endurance ride across the desert, like Viggo Mortensen in Hidalgo. Chances are you've never even seen a white lion up close, no matter how many zoos you've visited. That's because they're rare in the extreme. They weren't even spotted in the wild until 1938, and even then they were few and far between. Their pristine white color is due to a genetic mutation, a recessive gene that must be present in both mother and father. But oddly, white lions are not albinos. They're the product of a less severe mutation in the gene that causes albinism. White lions can be bred for captivity, but only through the use of inbreeding, which comes with a significant risk for other genetic problems, such as reduced fertility personality and physical defects. This is why they're so rarely seen in the zoo, and also why purchasing a cub will set you back more than your average high-end imported sports car. A single white lion cub can go for up to $140,000 if you can find one. And just in case you're curious as to where you might be able to view one publicly, we've got you covered. If you're in Europe or Asia, you've got maybe a dozen options, including West Midlands Safari Park in the UK, Jerkes Zoo in France, and Bukit Gombong Safari Park in Malaysia. But if you're in North America, you've only got one: Toronto Zoo, where 4 white lion cubs were born in 2015.
Before I reveal the most amazing example, I'd like to remind you to subscribe if you've enjoyed this video. We upload amazing fact-filled list videos daily. Also, make sure to click that bell icon to stay updated, or you'll regret on missing out on some amazing knowledge that could have filled your brain.
This isn't a pet you can buy, because Sir Lancelot the Labrador, or more accurately Sir Lancelot Encore, is one of a kind. In 2008, Nina and Edgar Otto lost their beloved pup Sir Lancelot to cancer. Fortunately, Edgar is the son of legendary NASCAR co-founder Edward Otto, meaning that the couple had the spare cash lying around to attempt something only one other person yet had: bringing their pet back to life through cloning. The attempt cost them a whopping $155,000, but it was wildly successful. It produced Sir Lancelot Encore, whom the couple says has the exact same personality and mannerisms as the original, and who has also managed to father no fewer than 8 puppies. Lancelot was not the first pet to be successfully cloned. A Texas woman had previously paid $50,000 to clone her cat Little Nicky, but Lancelot, or Lancey for short, was the first cloned dog, and the Ottos couldn't be happier with him. The Morpho Aurora butterfly, which was found and sold by insect collector Antenna Inc., only qualifies loosely as a pet because it was dead and preserved when the sale was made. But it's a truly unique specimen, a bizarre aberration that will likely never be found again in our lifetimes. Native to Peru and Bolivia, the Morpho Aurora is a beautiful insect in its own right, smaller than North American butterflies with an amazing crystalline color pattern which identifies it immediately. But the specimen in question brought down the big bucks for one specific reason: an extra wing. Most butterflies have 4 wings. The Morpho Aurora specimen, sold to a private collector, had 5. The extra wing was just a tiny deformity, but it was enough to elevate the specimen into the realm of the exceedingly rare. It sold for an amazing $195,000, presumably to the most insanely dedicated collector of butterflies the world has ever seen. The Holstein cow is the most prized breed, valued for their high milk production and docile temperament, and a cow named Missy is the queen of the breed. Due to her sterling genetic makeup, Missy was sold at auction in 2009 to a buyer in Denmark for an eye-popping $1.2 million, making her the 5th cow ever to go for more than $1 million, and the most expensive cow ever sold. It wasn't for nothing. Missy went on to become the grand champion at the 2009 Western Fall National Show, the supreme grand champion of all breeds at the 2011 World Dairy Expo in Wisconsin, and the winner of that same title at the Royal Agricultural Winter Fair in Toronto that same year. She's also gone on to produce 4 offspring, all of whom are female, and whose genetic material is being used to improve the breeding and milk production of Holsteins all over the world. The Tibetan Mastiff was originally bred to secure herds of livestock, and it's easy to see why. They're absolute monsters, easily outweighing the average human. But like most dogs, they're also genial and friendly. Purebred specimens are quite rare, and they've become the latest status symbol among the very rich. In 2009, a Chinese woman dropped $500,000 on one, and the very next year, another specimen was valued at $1.47 million. But in 2011, that record was edged out when a Chinese tycoon paid a cool $1.5 million for Big Splash, a 180-pound behemoth whose breeder called him a perfect specimen. Amazingly, Big Splash, whose Chinese name is Hong Dong, was only 11 months old when he was purchased, meaning he wasn't even finished growing yet. As of now, he's the most expensive dog ever sold, a record that could likely only be broken by another Mastiff. However, that probably won't happen anytime soon, as the breed is among the rarest on the planet. Since Big Splash found his new home 7 years ago, no pureblood Mastiffs have been sold on the open market. Green Monkey was a thoroughbred racehorse, a descendant of legendary stallions Northern Dancer and Secretariat. As a 2-year-old colt, he was sold at auction in 2006 for the single highest price ever paid for a horse, an unbelievable $16 million. As incredibly steep as that price was, buyer Dean DiRenzo still thought he was in for a healthy profit. The horse had run an 8th mile in an absolutely blazing 9.8 seconds, and DiRenzo was all but certain that he had a star on his hands. Unfortunately, it was not to be. The horse only ran 3 races, winning none of them, before suffering a spine injury at Churchill Downs. Only 2 years after commanding that insane purchase price, Green Monkey was put out to stud on DiRenzo's farm. In May 2018, due to an ongoing battle with laminitis, he was euthanized, but his legacy lives on in the colts and fillies he sired. DiRenzo says there will never be another horse like him, and he may be right. At any rate, there will almost certainly never be one as expensive.